Welcome back to My Conscious Dad, right here on your hometown station, AM 1220, KHTS. Before we went on the break, we were talking about taking a break and having a 24-hour rule to sit on your emotions and before you make any decisions. So one of the questions that came up on the break was, how long do you wait? How long do you give your kids the time to think about it and give them their space before you need to talk to them and figure out what's going on?
You know, if you really think about the question, you really just have to ask yourself, well, if I don't know the answer, who do I ask? And I think the answer to that is just ask your son or daughter, how much time do you need? You know, again, it goes back to the parent realizing that instead of me figuring out the rules or me figuring out what's a good time for them to wait and how long, you know, open up the possibility that your son or daughter can check in with themselves and ask themselves, yeah, how much time do I need? I never thought about it. So a lot of times it's, hey, you know what, Dad, I just need some time. Okay, great. How much time do you need? I don't know, give me till dinner, after dinner, or how about we talk about it in the morning? You know, it's really about opening up a discussion and really kind of, you know, interacting with your son or daughter and believing that they're competent enough to be able to decide for themselves how much time they might need.
Yeah, and what I really like, and you do this a lot, is when I'm sitting with it, sometimes I want to go out there and I want to start talking and I want to, get everything handled, but I'm so nervous that I'm just like pacing around in my room or knee shaking. And sometimes all it takes is you knocking on the door, coming in and saying, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? Just checking in, no pressure kind of thing. Then that opens the door for me to say, yeah, actually, this is what I want to say. So sometimes just checking in and maybe they won't immediately want to talk, but they'll know that you're still there, you're still waiting on them.
I think that one of the things that your spirit voice is going to be telling you as a parent is to constantly be an invitation. So as you ask your son or daughter to think about some things, or you're planting seeds, you know, that check-in part is just constantly being an invitation to see if you're ready yet. That's all. It's just, you know, if I knock on the door, it's, you know, hey, have you thought about it? Or do you need more time? It's just a courtesy thing. But I'm constantly always being an invitation and inviting you to either engage with me or ask for more time, or maybe there's some information that I didn't give you that you might need. So it's just always, you know, the follow-up is good, but it's really me just coming more from an invitation, always inviting you to see if you're ready or not. Because I already know that, you know, kids, you know, if they're sitting on something, they're not going to have the courage to come back to you. And if you expect your 15, 16-year-old, even your 30-year-old son or daughter, if you've asked them something to sit on it, they might not have the courage to come back to you and bringing it up again. So guess who gets to do that? I do.
Yeah, and I have a couple more questions, but before I jump into it, if you're listening or you're tuned in on Facebook Live and you have questions for us that are relevant to the show, please comment, please ask. You can even call in. Our line number is 661-298-5487. But of course, comment on Facebook, let us know. We'll answer your questions, but first we'll get started on the rest of mine. So another one of my questions was, what are your instincts? Where do I look? How do I tap into them? Maybe give an example how you tap into it as a parent, how you do it.
It's a great question. You know, when I think about sports, because I played sports as a kid, several different sports, especially when I was young, 4 years old, 5 years old, started playing baseball. And in baseball, you practice. People teach you, your coaches teach you how to hit the ball. They teach you how to field the ball. They teach you how to run, how to slide. So you go through the fundamentals of learning all those things. Then what happens is at a certain point, whether you're 3 years into playing the sport or 5 years, at a certain point, all of the game becomes an instinct. It's instinctual. It's like I don't have to think about it anymore. So what happens is when it comes to personal growth is you have to learn and you have to practice. And through the art of practicing, you start to realize that there's some instinctual things that are deep down inside your spirit that it's going to start serving it up for you. Just like in baseball, when I'm learning and practicing how to hit a fastball, all of a sudden I get a curveball thrown at me, and my instincts, kick in, and all of a sudden now I'm able to adjust and hit the curveball. And so the thing that I want to, really articulate is that trust your spirit and keep checking in. The more you keep checking in, the more the instinctual part of you and your parenting is going to just come out. It's like it has to evolve to that level. It has to develop from within. And you got to keep going within to touch bases with it.
So what's one of the things that you do, or I guess your number one go-to that you find is the most effective?
A lot of times what I do is let's say I'm done with one of my coaching sessions, or I'm done here at the station, or I'm done somewhere at work, and I'm on my way home. What I do is I do a process of doing a clarity. I do like a process where I get centered and grounded, so that when I pull up into the driveway and I get out of the car and close the door, me slamming that door is helping me shift into dad mode, or helping me shift into husband mode, and if I can't get it done on the drive, what I do is actually I sit in the driveway. And some of you have seen me when you're pulling in and you're still seeing me in the car. A lot of times what I'm doing is I'm clearing off my day so that I don't carry my stuff into the home. It's helping me create an intention of being purposeful, of walking into that house. Like when I walk in, I want to be in dad mode. I don't want to be in coach mode, or I don't want to be in advisor mode. I want to be a dad, or I want to be a husband. So a lot of that stuff, it takes practice. I've been practicing that for so long that helps me get centered and grounded, and it helps me tap into the instincts of being a great parent and being able to go there really quick. It's no different than you playing two sports. You just finished playing football game, and your parents are like, hurry up, we got to get you now to your baseball game, and you're grabbing a sandwich or whatever. Right before you get onto the baseball field, you have to change your uniform. You got to get into the proper uniform. So you go into the locker room and you take the baseball uniform off, or you take your regular street clothes off, and you put on your pants and your socks and your cleats, and get your glove all oiled up. And so you got to prep yourself. And I don't know how many parents are actually learning how to shift off and surrendering and letting go. Taking one hat off and then putting on the other hat and stepping onto the field and really getting ready to their parenting duties. You know what?
Because I do that a lot with work. I'll come like 10 minutes early and sit in my car and kind of just get clear. This is prepare myself for a full day of work. So sometimes I think parents, or even just people in general who are unconscious, they go home and they go to work and they hang out with their friends and their family, and they do everything, and it just kind of gets jumbled and bunched into one that there's no separating and there's no distinguishing different parts of your life, and just being conscious of what you're doing and what's coming next and who you're being in those different places, because the same person you're being at work isn't necessarily the same person that you are going to be at home.
That's right.
And if they kind of get jumbled up and you're a boss and you go home and you treat your kids like a boss, it's not the same. It's not as effective.
Yeah, and some parents don't realize that they're doing that, and that's why we're having the discussion, is opening up the possibility of, hey, are you transitioning from work straight into home, and you're not really helping yourself get centered, get grounded, get clear about what your intention is tonight or what your purpose is. I even do it for meetings. If we're going to have a meeting, I will step outside and review what it is that I want to talk about, or even the radio show. I prepare myself a little bit of time to get centered, to get grounded, to remind myself of what it is I want to say, what are the landing points, what's my intention. I don't want to just go in something and just wing it. I want to at least have a guideline in my mind and in my heart of what message I want to convey. I'm also mindful of when I convey the message, who am I being when I convey it? That's important too, and I don't think a lot of parents really stop and think about, when I tell my son or daughter that this is what's going to happen, or this is the new rule change, who do I want to be when I deliver that message? And you being mindful and saying, I want to be loving and I want to be compassionate, that this is going to be something that they might not like, so I need to deliver it in a compassionate, loving, kind way. And so that's important, I think, as a parent, is you being clear about what your intention is when you're parenting and what your intention is when you leave the house and go to work.
Yeah, I really like that, and I really like what you said, so I kind of want to reiterate it just a little bit differently. I actually, growing up, I actually learned that in an acting class. They said when you do a scene, portray what you want. So figure out what the character wants, and then every time you do something, say a line, move your arm, whatever it is, it's with the intention of whatever you want, getting whatever you want. So I know that kind of sounds a little bit selfish, but if you're in a meeting and you are trying to get what you want, hopefully it serves everybody, of course, but if you're trying to get what you want, any little slip up, any little word, as soon as you lose track of that, the meeting goes all over the place, and everybody can leave unhappy, or it doesn't really serve everyone. And I never really thought about applying that in my real life. So I'll jump into a meeting right after finishing a different meeting or finishing something else, so I jump in with a scrambled head and not really a clear mind at all. So I guess I just kind of wanted to say that out loud so other people can hear me, but also I could hear myself say that, especially for work and even my home and family and personal relationships, because I'll jump into anything just because I think I have the time, but really I'm not making the time to sit down and reflect. I'm not making that a priority, and I really should be.
That's awesome. Another thing too is sometimes I have to write myself notes that I get to remind me and who I am around the house or in my car, or scribble little notes in different areas to remind me of the guy that I want to be. I don't know if we still have it, but for a long time I had a note on the door. Do you remember the note on the door?
Yeah, it was a list of what our priorities are.
Now, you notice how you said it was our priorities, because it wasn't your priorities, they were my priorities. And they became...
But you made them mine.
Exactly. But I didn't tell you, hey, I want you to follow these. They were little notes that I made to myself to remind me, and unconsciously you just kept seeing them. Every time you open the door, every time you go out of the house, you would see that little note. Do you remember what the note said?
Yeah, it said, what are your priorities? And there was a list of family, work, God, relationships.
That's right. And so, God was first, family, friends, and then work was at the end. And it just reminded me of what's a priority and what's really important to me, what really matters. And those little notes to help you get centered and grounded and remind you of who, it's like little formulas for success to help you stay on a narrow path to the place that you want to be at.
And I just realized, because that note was on there when I was in high school, so I didn't even really pay attention to it. Eventually it just becomes part of it, and you just became part of the door. And that note hasn't been on there for at least 2 years, and I remember what it said, but I also remember it saying, it was a question, what's the order of your priorities? So there were the recommendations, but we get to put them in our own order.
That's right.
It wasn't you forcing your priorities onto us and saying, these better be your priorities in this order. It was in a question that said, here's some priorities, which ones are most important to you?
And I don't even think they had numbers. It just said God, family, friends, work. So yeah, they were my priorities, but I didn't put a number there. You could have seen it however you wanted and prioritized it however you wanted, or you could have created your own. You didn't even have to have those be yours. But guess where I got that from?
Where?
From my dad. Because when I was growing up, he had that put on his right by the telephone. When I was a teenager, I guess for whatever reason, he was struggling with trying to, reinvent a relationship with me. And so he put that up on the telephone for him to remind him of what kind of a dad he needed to be. So it was little things that we learn from our parents that we end up becoming parents, and we try to take those good things and try to implement it. And I hope that I'm being a good enough example for you, because one day if you choose to be a mom, you're going to have those little eyes staring at you and watching you, and you want to ask yourself, how do I want to parent, and where do I want to parent from? Do I want to parent from my ego, or do I want to parent from my spirit? And you got to decide that. You got to find your own value. So I guess I want to turn the tables around and ask you, what's the value that you see for yourself as a future mom, distinguishing the difference between parenting from your ego or from spirit?
Well, one, it's not we don't always pick up all of, or I guess I don't always pick up all of the positive things that I see. I pick up a lot of the negative things too. So I guess the thing that I see the most value is seeing you and Mom make mistakes, and seeing you guys, go to your egos, and you guys being unperfect, so that I know what it looks like, so that when I'm doing it, I remember what it looks like being, the little eyes looking up at you. So one of the things that you've always taught me and my sister, I'm sure my brother too, but it's always us, because we see people in our family make mistakes, and you always say, what are you learning? And we would always, be annoyed, roll our eyes, oh, we learned that family's first, or whatever the response is. But that has taught us so much, just learning from other people's mistakes. But we probably wouldn't have come to that conclusion on our own if you hadn't constantly all those years been asking us, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? What are you not going to do? And it's not necessarily focusing on the bad stuff. It's acknowledging the bad stuff and then focusing on what we're going to do about it.
Yeah, and sometimes we learn not from the great examples, we learn from the bad examples. And I think that most of us as parents, have our own experience of, our moms being moms and dads being dads. And a lot of times we told ourselves, you know what, when I become a mom or when I become a dad, I'm not going to be as mean as you are or whatever. And I've had shows about this when we talk about enabling, right? Mm-hmm. Like the Generation X, when you were little, your dad always said no to you or whatever, and you probably told yourself, when I'm a dad, I'm never going to be as mean as you. And so what ends up happening is you become a dad now, and you slide from the mean part where you say no, and you slide all the way to the other side of the spectrum, and now you say yes to everything. And then 16 years later, you realize you have a kid that you've enabled, and now they're entitled, and now they're throwing temper tantrums because all of a sudden now you want to say no. You've trained that kid to give them everything that you've always said yes. So the trick is, when you're deciding that I'm never going to be like that, that's great that you've decided that you want to adjust your own parenting style, but don't slide all the way to the other side of the side of the spectrum. Slide somewhere into the middle, because saying no, there's some good, valuable reasons why you should say no. But if you're no 98% of the time, you're going to have resentful kids to you. So you got to learn how to slide to the middle and have a balance. And we talked about this a couple shows ago about the enabling. My rule for saying no is for every 5, I'm going to say no to 2, and then I'm going to say yes to 3. And so it helps me stay balanced, even though I want to say yes to all 5 of them. Like, I want to shower you guys with, because there's certain things I didn't have when I was a kid that I want to give that to you. But what I've learned is that I really get turned off by the enabling side of people, that I don't want to rob you guys from the opportunity to suffer and struggle, because I know that there's some learning lessons in there. And so a lot of times I purposely say no to you, trusting that later on in life, when you're a 40-year-old woman, that you're going to come back and you're going to say, and this is a dream of mine, and I don't know if it'll ever happen, but you'll come back and say, hey, Dad, thanks for saying no to me those times I know you could have gave me, and you didn't, because it taught me a valuable lesson.
We will be right back. Stay tuned for more of My Conscious Dad right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Good afternoon. You're listening to My Conscious Dad right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Before we went on the break, we were talking about saying no, and I kind of wanted to stay on that topic just because, since our topic today is trusting your instincts, I think saying no is a big part of trusting your instincts. Sometimes we want to say yes to our kids, or as kids we want our parents to say, oh yeah, you can go to that really dangerous, creepy party. But you as parents, you guys have to say no sometimes, and you have to trust those instincts that maybe this time you have to let your kids hate you a little bit. And I know a lot of parents, especially the ones that want to be friends with their kids, or the ones that are unconsciously enabling their kids. It's hard to say no sometimes. So I guess I want to ask you, in certain situations, either between myself, my sister, or my brother, how did that look? Or how, from our side and your side as a parent, how hard was it saying no sometimes?
You know how I feel about the word hard.
How difficult, how challenging.
It was definitely a challenge for me, because I love you guys, and I want you guys to be happy, and I want you guys to enjoy your life, and I want you to have things that I never had. And I think all parents, are cut from that cloth. They want their kids to have a better life than they had, and they want to, appease them and do all that kind of stuff. But there was a part of me that my intuition said to me, my instinct said, you can't give them everything they want, because some of the things that I learned that were valuable for me, I can only learn them when I was struggling. When my dad told me no, and I threw a fit, and I was upset, and I would go in my own room and cry as a teenager, and come up, do the whole "you don't love me" and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't until I was a wise young man that I looked back and went, wow, you know what? Because you said no to me, it taught me how to go down deep inside and figure out how to create it for myself. Now, had my dad just said yes and handed me things or gave me things or made it easier for me, I never would have created that little inner warrior that I have inside of me that perseveres, that doesn't take no for an answer, that goes down deep and finds solutions and seeks answers and reinvents myself, or asks other people for help, or we all have this little inner champion or little inner warrior inside of us that can develop if you as a parent learn how to not give your kids everything or not jump in and save them all the time. You have to let them struggle and suffer a little bit, because that's what activates the little inner warrior inside that starts doing their Indian war cry. And my intuition told me that. My gut told me that. And when you listen to your gut and your intuition, that's tapped into your spirit. That's the spirit voice, trying to tap you on the shoulder and go, hey, maybe you shouldn't make that choice.
Yeah, there's been a lot of times where initially I threw a fit or acted like a brat, maybe even ignored you for a couple weeks after that because I didn't get what I wanted. But I've now realized at the end of the day, I am a problem solver, probably because of those things. All the times that I got told no, not just by you, but by people at work or people, friends or teachers or anything. I got told no, and then I had to reinvent myself. And I wouldn't have known how to do any of that if I hadn't been told no and had any experience trying to figure things out on my own. And I'm not going to lie, I still sometimes throw a temper tantrum, and I still sometimes, get frustrated that I didn't get what I wanted, but I never leave it at that. I throw a temper tantrum for a less and less amount of time until I can figure it out. So, I could be 30 years old, or your kids could be 30 years old still throwing a temper tantrum, as long as they can figure out how to win at the end.
Love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today on My Conscious Dad. We're here every Friday from 12 to 1 p.m. right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.